Everyone, thanks so much. I just want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and elders past, present and emerging. And of course, all of you here today, thanks for staying with us. It's been a long day, but yeah, we've had some great stories so far, and I'm really privileged to be part of this discussion today, and thanks to Artsource and to the university as well for having me here. I'm going to start off with a tiny little film instead of ending with one, so we'll go from there. Do you think it's loaded enough? Okay. That's okay.
Are you familiar with the three-body problem? It troubled Isaac Newton back in the 1600s as he watched the moon moving through the night sky. Newton's law of gravity can exactly determine the orbit of one body around another, the moon and the earth, say. However, where a third is involved, the sun, the orbit becomes unpredictable, non-repeating, unsolvable. The three-body problem is also the title of a trilogy of best-selling sci-fi novels by Liu Cixin about Trisolaris. Trisolaris is a planet in a system with three suns, whose unpredictable orbit means that it is alternately ravaged by periods of intense heat and extreme cold. With the existence of their home planet under perpetual threat, the Trisolarans look for habitable planets to colonize. On Earth, they make contact with a Chinese physicist whose faith in humanity is so shaken, she believes that only an outside force may be able to save us. The three-body problem is a useful concept for navigating Why Not Ask Again, the 11th Shanghai Biennale, which runs between November 2016 and March 2017 at Shanghai Power Station of Art. Curated by the New Delhi-based Raqs Media Collective, Jibesh Bagchi, Monica Narula and Shudabrata Singh Gupta, the show includes work by 92 artists and artist groups from more than 40 countries. The majority of these hail from what might be called, with qualification, the Global South. The show, though, while haunted by the spectres of colonialism, seems less interested in East-West binaries than in the messy complexities of our fundamental interconnectedness at the level of the micro and macro, personal and political, as lovers, family members, citizens, consumers, and animals that are part of an ecosystem that sustains us all and for which we're collectively responsible. It offers some dystopian, as well as some more hopeful propositions for our interactions with one another and with the natural world. Aptly, given that the word Raqs refers to the entranced state of whirling dervishes, dance is a thread that draws us through this exhibition. On the ground floor, Hao Jingban's film Offtakes uses the ballroom as a metaphor for the interaction between individual and collective against the backdrop of changes to Chinese society. Jukti Topo Agopo, the last movie by Bengali filmmaker Hrithik Ghatak, and another curatorial touchstone, features a sequence of West Bengali Chahor dance. Screened here as part of a work by Boynak Biswas, the dance symbolises a search for origins in the troubled first decades after Indian partition. In Li Mingwei's Our Labyrinth, a performer scatters a small mound of rice grains with slow, ritualistic gestures. While the Biennale programmes 51 Personae and Theory Opera, which will unfold across the course of the exhibition, follow a choreographic logic of action and interaction. Less literally, the question lurking behind many of the works in this show is who must dance to whose tune. A new commission by the Danish collective Superflex invites us to lie beneath a planetarium-like screen. We listen to a story that interweaves Chinese zodiac legend with the historic journey of Chinese pigs to Danish farms and the crisscrossing, in time and space, of Danish telegram wires and Chinese internet cables. How many national symbols, like Danish bacon, are founded on an essential foreignness? The looped film revolves, like constellations through the night sky. The pendulum of geopolitical influence swings from east to west and back. Circles and cycles are everywhere, from Aki Sasamoto's witty laundrette washer dryers to the real-time 365-day solar calendar over which John Gerard's shimmering, digitally simulated oil slick unfolds. If this exhibition is about anything, it's perhaps the failure of linear progress, the failure of globalised capitalism to deliver on its promise to continue to make things better for us all. 3 days before the Biennale opened, when Donald Trump was elected President of the United States, we witnessed one catastrophic effect of the collapse of this narrative in a country where it has served as a kind of foundation myth. Barack Obama's reassuring last words in his election night speech, "No matter what happens, the sun will rise in the morning," form an uncanny counterpoint to the sunset that closes the first book in the third Body Problem trilogy, where humanity's fate seems sealed. Will what rises in the morning be the same sun? Will we get the chance to do things differently? Raqs urges us to ask questions again, because the answers might change. They know that no two turns of the wheel are ever the same.
Sorry, I might need your hand. Thanks. So thanks everyone for listening to that. So my name's Tess Maunder, and I was one of the co-curators of this exhibition that was just played over. As you heard, Raqs Media Collective were the chief curators. And if you aren't already familiar with their practice, they're New Delhi-based curators and writers and artists themselves. So myself as a co-curator, I was part of 4 other co-curators, thank you, who worked alongside Raqs for this exhibition. And those other co-curators came from both India and China, from different parts of those countries. And yeah, I have always, in my projects, been very interested in, similarly to you, multiculturalism and looking at that within Australia. And so for me, this project was a really great exercise to basically work on a project that was essentially an inter-Asia project. And I felt very privileged to be part of the curatorial team for that. So yeah, yes, we did find out about Trump 3 days before the opening. Right when everyone was installing and had been doing massive hours. So it was a very funny context. Yeah, so just recapping on what was brought up in that little talk. So that was basically a film by Freeze. They came in and did this really great film. So I just thought it'd be great to get someone else's voice rather than me being the only person speaking about the exhibition. Yeah, it opened November last year in Shanghai, in this venue called the Power Station of Art. Now the venue itself is very sort of turbine-esque. It's very industrial, very big, and funnily enough, it's not really within the centre of Shanghai at all. It's actually sort of almost on the periphery of the city where a lot of the other like exhibition halls and places like that are held. So there's no foot traffic. It's a very funny venue because you know, it's massive and it's obviously such an important venue for China, but at the same time, there's no people walking past. So people that want to come and see the exhibition deliberately, you know, get a train or get in a cab to come and visit. So as an outsider coming in, I found that very interesting in terms of audience engagement, and we were absolutely delighted for the opening to have tremendous lines at the door. And of course we can credit that to China's amazing population and people that are interested in art. But also, yeah, it was really great to see so many people coming out for the opening. So there's a few different things I can talk about. I also just wanted to mention that I'm a curator myself, I'm not an artist, but for me the most interesting work that I've been involved in has actually been working with artists who are curators as well. And that started out, I'm from Brisbane, and Brisbane, as you guys might know, and it could be similar to here as well, has a very strong artist-run community. And so I went to art school, I actually studied as an artist, and really came out from that grassroots background. And I just think it's really lovely how I've had the ability to, for artists to trust me enough to include them on their curatorial projects, both in those initial days and now also within this same Biennale context, which, you know, obviously seems like such a huge project, but it was nice to still have that continuation in a way. So I guess, yeah, we've been talking about today, audience engagement and different ways for that to be approached, and lots of different concerns coming to play with about, art in the public realm and who is the art talking for, and all of these other concerns. So I think, it's interesting because the Biennale, quite in reversal to the public art that we've been discussing today, has essentially been mainly in one venue. So, yeah, I'll show you a few images. This is the Bund in Shanghai, and this is some of the advertising for the project. It's pretty crazy stuff. And these are the lines that I was talking about for the opening. Thankfully, I was able to have a few Australians in the program, and so I was really delighted to include this series of work by Christian Thompson, who is now based, I guess, between Melbourne and London, as he's doing his Oxford education as well. And this series, Museum of Others, is such I think, an important series in Australia, for Australia, because it's really about shifting the gaze, and that's, Christian's behind the work, and he's performing, actively performing that reversal of the gaze by, using these placards and these masks as a way to, debunk these colonial figures. So I was really happy that we could have Christian's work in the biennial. Lee Mingwei did an amazing performance, and you guys saw that in the film as well, which I think captures it a little bit more than what this still image does. I might just scroll through a few images so you guys get a sense. One of the most interesting things, I think, about this project was returning to this idea of generosity of the chief curators, who are also artists, was that I mentioned that I was part of the co-curator team, but in addition to that, and it seems like there's so many people involved in the project, which was a reality, but they also invited another 7 curators from different parts of the world to sort of actively contribute to the project as well. And this was called the Curatorial Project. And I think, there's a lot of these things that have been attempted to be staged within exhibitions, but I think it was really great within our biennial, because Raqs Media Collective and us as a curatorial team were very interested in merging these ideas within the exhibition itself. So what you didn't see was sort of like, often that space is like one curator's vision and another curator's vision, blah, blah, blah. It was actually a very successful merging and continuation of all of these different voices. So, I think, biennales get criticised a lot for, too many cooks and all of these sort of things, which of course is true, but I think in our case, at least, myself coming from the curatorial team, I did feel that there were some successes in that format. It'll be interesting to talk more about audiences and how they experienced it, but it did feel like a cohesive exhibition as well. I wanted to talk a little bit about, I think curators can get quite caught up in exhibitions as formats. And I think for me as a curator, I'm really interested in a wide array of public address. So for me, that means working as an editor on a publication, because that might be right for a specific project. Or that might mean totally ditching the idea of an exhibition and doing something that's more public programs engaged and more education engaged. I think for me, I'm really interested in sort of really thinking about the form that things can happen within. I think it's almost like thinking from the position of an artist. People always say to artists, oh, so you're a painter. And I think you can sort of change that analogy to curators. Oh, so you make exhibitions. Well, sure, but there's a lot of other stuff involved as well. So in that frame of mind, within the biennial, I want to talk about one project that we did, which is called 51 Persona. This is a little book documenting the project here. Now, I wasn't working directly on this project. One of my co-curator peers was Chen Yuan, and she runs this great space in Shanghai that engages with migrant communities there. And it's called Dinghaiqiao Mutual Aid Society. And I think Shanghai is really an emblematic city in China because, you know, there's so much urban development, there's so much rapid change, and what happens is communities like migrant communities from regional China have come in on the fringes, and essentially where they're living is getting ripped out from underneath them and turned into development. So this project that Chen Yuan did in association with the 11th Shanghai Biennale was basically about giving agency to these communities and doing that within the gigantic Biennale context. So thinking about what would be a good strategy to do that within. So what we decided to do was to do an open call. And this was actually fantastic because we did it way before the biennial opened. So it was sort of about 4 months before the open call happened. And basically it was essentially just an open call for voices from Shanghai. So it was super open in the sense of an open call. And the type of responses that we got were things like a guy that had been, you know, works a 9-to-5 office job, but in all his spare time does bird watching. And he's been doing this for like 40 years in the wetlands in Shanghai that, I mean, you wouldn't even know wetlands are in Shanghai. And we got this guy who's a knife sharpener. And we got this amazing noodle maker. And it was just really about, you know, people being proud of what they do in their everyday lives without this sort of monumentality to it. And essentially what the project was trying to do was to, obviously Biennale has international visitors coming in, right? So it was about acknowledging how those visitors can have an interaction with, a meaningful interaction with the local community in Shanghai beyond this exhibition. So I think that the 51 Persona project, which was basically a public programs project, was quite successful in that aspect. And so basically the way it was structured was the Biennale, as you guys saw, ran from November to March, so about a 5-month period. So things intensified during the opening week, so there was more events. And then that continued throughout the the continuation of the biennial. So there was at least one event per week. And what happened was, again, it was a very open thing where people could sign up to participate in the program, and they could go along to essentially meet these people who had essentially opened up about what they do in their lives. So that involved, you know, going into someone's very intimate kitchen and looking at their knife sharpening skills, which you probably couldn't do in Australia, let's be honest, with bureaucracy. So yeah, it was quite amazing. And also the feedback from the international community and even, I guess, the interstate community in China from people that hadn't necessarily engaged with these local communities and what they meant to be within Shanghai was that, yeah, they felt very privileged to be part of that discussion. Yeah, I mean, it was a huge project, and I was one of many voices involved in the project. So maybe, and like we can continue it in our panel discussion as well, but we've got 10 minutes left now. So if you guys just wanted to ask me about any aspect of the project, I'm really willing to, you know, talk about what is relevant for you guys. So if anyone has any questions, yeah, there was 92 artists from over 40 countries. So yeah, if anyone has any specific questions they want to ask, please do. Or I can.
So as a curator,
yeah.
do you brought in artists that like Christian and other artists, or I mean, you brought in a bunch of artists as part of the curatorial process?
Yeah, I can talk about the curatorial process. So basically, so it was funny because Raqs Media Collective are based in New Delhi, so this meant that I was basically based with them in New Delhi for a period of 8 months in the lead up to working on an exhibition in China. So it was quite a funny thing because here we are in India trying to conceptualize what's happening in China. But essentially, probably similarly to a lot of different projects that happen, it was just a sharing process. So Raqs Media Collective were the chief curators, so of course they had, their initial concepts, and then they invited that open that up to us to give our feedback and our voices on that concept. And then from there, we had a massive long list of artists of maybe, I would say, at least like 300 or 400 artists. And it was just a really actually great research process. So it meant that we basically sat down in a big round table and just had like a slide projector up and just looked through so many artists' work and discussed, essentially what are the pros and the cons of how that artist could fit within the concept and fit within, what is happening right now in China and stuff like that. So it was a great process and, whittled it down a little bit to 92 artists. And that sort of happened over probably a 4-month period. So, yeah. Yeah. Within the curatorial process? Yeah, I think, this is a massive biennial, so I'm really focusing in on essentially like one public program from the whole biennial. So the biennial itself was within a 5-floor venue that's sort of like Turbine Hall-esque with the 92 artists from 40 different countries. So that was a very typical Biennale exhibition in the sense that, there was relationships that were trying to be performed throughout the works and stuff like that. But this project was very separate to that and very deliberately was about getting out of the museum and opening up to residents in Shanghai that perhaps wouldn't come to the museum. Perhaps, we don't really talk about class much in Australia, but perhaps it's a class conversation. Perhaps it's an accessibility conversation. So it's like a public program from within the whole biennial, if that makes sense. Well, I wasn't the sole curator of that project, but I was on the curatorial team of the whole biennial, and so that meant that, I guess I had a voice in some of the surrounding conversations about that. Yeah. Well, this book was produced prior to the biennial opening. So what that meant was, this was the biennial general guidebook, and when people bought this, they got the other book for free with it, basically. So, and in this book, it has all of the people that are involved in the project listed and how you can sign up for it. So essentially, we were like forcing people to consume the information that would enable them to be able to attend the events. And there's also a website, of course, but yeah, I guess you wouldn't know to go to the website unless you had that prompting, so that's what the book was for as well. Yeah. Of this particular... they participated as guests. So it was actually really great for the artists because a lot of them, we had maybe 30% of artists from China and we had maybe, 70% of artists from other parts of the world who were perhaps visiting China for the first time. And so the feedback were from the artists in the actual exhibition that they really loved this process because, it took them away from what they were working on after they had installed, obviously. It just enabled them to get a glimpse of Shanghai that wouldn't have been possible without the project happening. There's all sort of, it just, it's sort of like a community engagement that wouldn't have been possible without the framework that was involved and specifically without my co-curator that essentially led the project as well because of her networks and everything else. Okay, yeah, sorry, time out. I just thought it'd be nice to open it up to the audience. I guess we can continue later because I think biennales are such a massive thing that, you know, I'm interested to hear what you guys wanted to hear about. But yeah, so basically that's a summary of the project. Essentially recapping for me, it was really great to be part of a project that was an Inter-Asia project and that we did focus on the Global South and had 92 artists involved in that process. And I think for me now, I'm really still unpacking a lot of that project, and I'm really looking forward to those ideas feeding into my ongoing curatorial work in Australia. So hopefully we can continue that work here. Cool. Thanks, guys.